Hi, we're from Manhattan High School.
I'm Esther.
I'm Allie.
I'm Jace.
I'm Amira.
And I'm Kate.
And today we are representing the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and we're talking to landowners of the area, employees of the Quivira National Wildlife Refuge, and community members.
This is our Rattlesnake Creek Management Plan.
Woo! The community within the Rattlesnake Creek watershed has long relied on the groundwater from the Ogallala Aquifer for irrigation, drinking, and the conservation of wildlife at Quivira. However, the aquifer is quickly depleting, with a study by David Stewart estimating a 70% decrease by 2060. The Quivira Wildlife Refuge has recently enforced seniority water rights in an attempt to preserve the wetlands and riparian area around Rattlesnake Creek. However, this action, if it goes through, will heavily damage the ability of farmers to produce enough income to sustain themselves. We at the United States Department of Fish and Wildlife propose a multifaceted plan to bring together those preserving the refuge and the surrounding community. This includes improving irrigation technology, implementing more efficient management practices, utilizing crop alternatives, as well as managing the nearby wetlands.
One of our proposed solutions for farmers that Chase touched on is more water-efficient irrigation systems. One of which is having farmers convert from spray irrigation systems to drip irrigation systems. According to the United States Geological Survey, drip irrigation is described as a water-saving irrigation system where the water is run through pipes with holes in them that are either buried or lying above the ground next to the crops, and then the water drips into the crop's roots and stems. Drip irrigation applies water only to the crop's roots, which saves more water than a traditional spray irrigation system because the water is directly absorbed and not blown away. Another solution is to have farmers use soil moisture probes. According to the University of Minnesota, soil moisture sensors measure or estimate the amount of water in the soil. The sensors can be stationary or handheld probes. They can help prevent farmers from overwatering crops by measuring the volumetric water content in soil, so the farmer knows when is a good time to water their crops. Moving on to the costs of these irrigation methods. According to the University of Florida, drip irrigation systems typically cost $500 to $1,200 per acre. This is because of capital investment, which is useful for several years, and due to annual cost of disposable parts. The average cost of a soil moisture probe is anywhere between $100 and $1,000 each. Here is a graph that shows the total cost over time, on average, of the subsurface drip irrigation and the sprinkler system. As you can see, the drip irrigation does have a higher initial cost, but as time goes on, it is less expensive to manage and use than a sprinkler system. So not only will these kinds of irrigation methods be more water conscious, they are also less expensive.
Since it's harder to put water back into the Quivira than to put water into farming, part of our plan is helping farmers effectively manage the water they are using. Our first practice is conservation tillage, which is a method where the soil is not tilled but instead is planted by insertion. This method has many benefits, including higher water holding capacity of the soil, it greatly reduces soil erosion, and less sedimentation ends up going into the rivers. Another method is water retirement, which is usually a 14-year contract to permanently retire water rights. Already 6,000 acres of water rights have retired. Water retirement is made possible by programs such as the KWTAP, which is an incentive-based program that allows producers to enroll with a contract. Water retirement should not be the main solution, however, since a lot of farmers could actually end up losing money since they still have to pay taxes on the land. This is a graph comparing the evaporation of water from conventional tillage, which is this one, and zero tillage. As you can see, zero tillage has much less evaporation of water than conventional tillage. There are 17 farms in Kansas that are water technology farms and supported by more than 100 organizations. They provide useful information about irrigation technologies and management techniques. Farmers can decide to become a part of this program and expand the education of small producers and come up with the most efficient ways to use water through irrigation technologies and management techniques. This picture, for example, gives information about the soil moisture in two plots of a water technology farm. Capturing and storing water by creating artificial ponds is also a great way to conserve water. In addition, irrigation scheduling could be used to maximize irrigation efficiencies by applying the exact amount of water needed to replenish soil moisture to make sure there is no overwatering. This can be done by installing soil moisture probes, as Kate mentioned before, to measure the need of the plants, and also by taking into account the weather and whether the farmer should actually irrigate that day.
A further step in our management plan includes crop alternatives. The 2020 Kansas Agricultural Overview tells us that corn and wheat are planted on more acres than any other Kansas crop. Both of these crops make farmers around $4.50 per bushel in 2020. A bushel of wheat is 60 pounds and 56 pounds for corn. Based on data from the water footprint, it requires 110 gallons of water to grow a pound of corn, meaning around 6,000 gallons of water can go into a bushel, which is only making the farmer less than $5. We have already seen how this amount of water is not sustainable for farmers, for the wetlands, or for the Ogallala Aquifer. The first part of our crop alternative for farmers involves transitioning to different cash crops that simply require less water. These include beans and safflower, both of which are adapted to more arid regions. Legumes like chickpea, lima beans, snap beans, and more are all drought resistant. Prices vary, but some legumes are worth up to $10 a bushel. A different crop alternative switch would be horticulture crops, which have significantly higher value than most ag cash crops. These require less water to produce and can be planted on much less land. This would be a more labor-intensive transition for farmers, but there are programs in place to help. The EQUIP program has a high tunnel system initiative that helps farmers buy high tunnels or hoop houses. This means farmers can extend their growing seasons and use precise irrigation methods. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is even providing funding to agencies specifically to set up education programs to teach farmers how to grow specialty crops. And then there are even newer organizations like the Land Institute, which alone received $50,000 in grant money from the USDA last year. The Land Institute works with perennial agriculture crops. These crops wouldn't require things like tillage or replanting each year, reducing costly inputs for farmers. Without tilling, soil erosion is even reduced when growing these crops. Whether it be easily implementable or a larger transition, there are many crop alternatives for farmers that conserve water, with funding in place to back up environmentally friendly efforts. This graph shows us water use in million acre feet of many different kinds of crops. Some of the ones I mentioned earlier, you can see safflower and dry bean in the lower side of the water use spectrum. Horticulture crops like fresh tomato and onion and garlic are here as well, and in comparison with grain and corn, you can see how effective these crops are at conserving water.
Alright, we're not just speaking on your farmers, but we also have possible funding solutions. The refugee system attracts more than 50 million visitors annually, including 25 million per year to observe, photograph wildlife, 9 million to hunt and fish, and more than 10 million to participate in educational and interpretation programs as stated by the National Wildlife Refugee Visitor Survey. Revenues for tourism divisions are funded by lottery proceeds distributed by the Kansas Lottery by the Economic Development Institute's funds, EDIF, and additional funding comes from sales such as the Kansas Magazine and other advertisements. 2 local grant programs are funded with the EDIF are the Attraction Development Grant and the Tourism Marketing Grant. Other possible ways to bring in funding is by doing little things such as adding donation boxes throughout the park and allowing and encouraging more hunters to hunt. This increase in funding will help us remove invasive trees for both private and public property of the farmers and the park. By removing the undesirable trees, this can help improve water sources, the local ecosystem, increase forage quality and production, and restore wildlife and habitats. One of the goals of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is to work with others to conserve, protect, enhance fish, wildlife, plants, and their habitats. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service uses a variety of management techniques to conserve and maintain plants and wildlife. One of those techniques is to remove invasive plants and trees. Trees do play a very important role in the ecosystem. However, invasive trees can cause a negative impact to the local economy, natural resources, and recreational use of the land. Undesirable trees can affect forage production, water sources, hibiscus plants, wildlife habitat, and hunting, as stated by Aaron Flander from the Partners for Fish and Wildlife. According to the Comprehensive Conservation Plan, the mammals, birds, plants, amphibians, reptiles, and fish would benefit from the reintroduction and improvement of diversified habitats. Natural cycles of wetlands would help reestablish the life cycles needed. With more native plants planted, animals would benefit from a balanced ecosystem, causing them to flourish, allowing for more hunting, causing a negative feedback loop of profit and revenue, which would help the park and the farmers.
Of course, while tourism can provide money for managing the Quivira Wildlife Refuge, there must be investment to ensure proper water quality and quantity in the watershed. The Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program pays farmers to retire their land or utilize it for buffering farmland from the refuge. The Environmental Quality Incentives Program, Conservation Stewardship Program, and the Partners for Fish and Wildlife in Kansas help fund and organize plans to reduce water usage, improve irrigation technology, and better use the farmland available. By utilizing these funding programs, the refuge and farmers can work together to create a harmony in water usage. There is no simple, perfect solution. Each plan has its pros and cons as those involved implement new techniques and technologies. However, if nothing is done, the aquifer will dry up, and the repercussions will be devastating for everyone. By implementing new irrigation technology, water management techniques, and new crop alternatives, less water can be used on the farmland itself. By managing the wildlife and wetlands of Quivira, as well as utilizing money from tourism donations, the refuge can ensure groundwater quality and allow nearby businesses to continue benefiting from tourism in the area. There's no perfect plan, but by taking these actions, we can all ensure that our groundwater is maintained for generations to come. Thank you to Michael Disney and Aaron Flanders from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for their input towards the development of this plan.
And thank you for listening!